I'm not big on legends and that kind of thing. I would like to be remembered as a good actor, somebody who tried to contribute. Gene Hackman was more than just a legendary actor. He was a man who shaped Hollywood with his unforgettable performances. But his final days remain shrouded in mystery. A cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in their Santa Fe home. What really happened inside his Santa Fe home? At first, nothing seemed unusual. An autopsy was performed. Initial findings noted no external trauma to either individual. Yet, as investigators dug deeper, unsettling details began to surface. There were 2 green and colored cell phones, 2 bottles of medication, 1 bottle of over-the-counter Tylenol. Strange clues, unanswered questions, and conflicting evidence turned a simple case into something far more complex. Join us as we uncover the new evidence found in Gene Hackman's estate that will leave you speechless. A shocking discovery. A few days ago, the internet was flooded with headlines that seemed too shocking to believe. Gene Hackman, the legendary actor known for his unforgettable performances, had been found dead in his Santa Fe home. But the tragedy didn't end there. Alongside him, his wife Betsy Arakawa and their beloved dog were also discovered lifeless. That the Oscar-winning American actor Gene Hackman, along with his wife Betsy, have been found dead. The unsettling discovery was made on a quiet afternoon when a maintenance worker arrived for a routine check at the couple's estate. After receiving no response at the door, concern began to grow. It wasn't unusual for Hackman and Arakawa to keep to themselves, but something felt off. The worker reached out to neighborhood security, who soon arrived to check inside. Peering through a window, they saw something that made their blood run cold, both Hackman and his wife lying motionless inside the house. Without hesitation, security called 911, and within minutes, deputies from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office were on the scene. As they entered the house, a heavy silence filled the air. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered glass, no broken locks, nothing to indicate an intruder, yet something was undeniably wrong. The first discovery was Betsy's body. She was found near a bathroom countertop, showing signs that she had been there for some time. A few feet away, a small dog was discovered in a closet, lifeless. On the surface, nothing appeared unusual. And then there was Gene. The 95-year-old actor, a man who had once commanded the screen with his presence, was found nearby, also showing signs of decay. A pair of sunglasses lay next to him, as if they had slipped from his hand at the moment he collapsed. Authorities quickly moved to assess the situation. Strangely, nothing in the house seemed disturbed. The furniture remained in place. Valuables were untouched. There was no sign of a struggle, no broken objects, no distressing scene, just an eerie stillness that only deepened the mystery. Perhaps even more unsettling was the condition of the couple's pets. While one dog was found deceased, 2 others remained alive, one standing near Betsy, the other roaming the property freely. If something had happened inside that house, why were these dogs unharmed? To rule out environmental causes, Santa Fe Fire Department officials and the New Mexico Gas Company were brought in to check for potential gas leaks or carbon monoxide poisoning. Their findings? Nothing. The air was clean, the pipes were intact, and there was no evidence of toxic exposure. At first, deputies leaned toward a natural explanation. Hackman was 95, and Arakawa, at 65, was not without the vulnerabilities of age. Perhaps this was simply a tragic case of illness, or even a heartbreaking accident. But as the hours passed and more details surfaced, the scene inside the house seemed increasingly strange. Why had no one heard from them in weeks? Why had both Gene and Betsy been found in separate parts of the house? Why had one dog died while the others survived? Initially, no one suspected a violent death. However, as more pieces of the puzzle emerged, the circumstances surrounding their passing became harder and harder to explain. And so, the investigation began, from a restless boy to a Hollywood legend. However, before we look further into what they discovered in the investigation, let's see who Gene actually was. Who was the man behind the legendary roles? How did he go from a restless boy in Illinois to one of the most respected actors in Hollywood history? Eugene Allen Hackman was born on January 30th, 1930 in San Bernardino, California, but his early years were anything but stable. His family moved frequently, always chasing new opportunities but never quite settling. Eventually they landed in Danville, Illinois, where young Gene grew up in a household shaped by struggle. His father worked at a local newspaper, operating the printing press, while his mother tried to keep things together at home. But life took a harsh turn when Gene was just 13. his parents divorced, and his father left the family for good. Imagine being a teenager, watching the man who was supposed to be your role model walk away, never to return. It's the kind of experience that can either break a person or push them to prove their worth. For Gene, it was the latter. From an early age, he dreamed of becoming an actor. At just 10 years old, he watched his first movie and was completely captivated by the action stars of the time, especially James Cagney. But who would have believed that a kid from a broken home, constantly moving from place to place, could ever make it in Hollywood? By the time he was 16, Gene had had enough of school and the restrictions of small-town life. Without telling anyone, he lied about his age and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. Can you imagine a teenage boy, barely old enough to drive, making the decision to serve in one of the toughest branches of the military? The Marines took him far from home, first to China, where he was stationed in Qingdao and later Shanghai. But as history unfolded and China fell to communist forces in 1949, Gene was quickly reassigned, spending time in both Hawaii and Japan. His role as a field radio operator put him in the heart of military operations, giving him discipline, structure, and a sense of purpose. However, even as he served his country, that childhood dream of acting never faded. After 4.5 years, in 1951, he was honorably discharged. What came next was a series of odd jobs and an uncertain future. He moved to New York City, working whatever gigs he could find, anything to stay afloat. Yet, tragedy struck again. In 1962, his mother died in a fire she accidentally started while smoking. It was another devastating blow, but Gene refused to let life defeat him. Determined to chase his passion, Gene studied journalism and television production at the University of Illinois under the GI Bill. But the pull of Hollywood was too strong, and he soon left school, moving to California to pursue acting full-time. In 1956, he joined the Pasadena Playhouse, a well-known training ground for aspiring actors. It was here that he met a young Dustin Hoffman. The two quickly became friends, bonding over their shared outsider status. Ironically, their classmates weren't impressed by them. Both Gene and Hoffman were voted least likely to succeed. Ouch! One instructor even gave Gene the lowest score in the history of the Playhouse. Can you imagine how discouraging that must have been, to be told, to your face, that you'd never make it? But instead of breaking him, the rejection only fueled his determination. Moving to New York City, Gene lived in cramped apartments with Hoffman and another struggling actor, Robert Duvall. The three of them would eventually become Hollywood icons, but at the time, they were just broke young men chasing a seemingly impossible dream. To survive, Gene took whatever jobs he could find. He even worked as a doorman at a Howard Johnson's restaurant. Bit by bit, Gene started landing small roles. He appeared in television series like Route 66, Naked City, and The Defenders. He got his first film credit in Lilith, starring Warren Beatty and Gene Seberg. His big break came in 1967 when he played Buck Barrow, the brother of the infamous outlaw Clyde in Bonnie and Clyde. The film was a massive hit, and Gene's performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Suddenly, Hollywood was paying attention, but the road wasn't all smooth. He was originally cast as Mr. Robinson in The Graduate, but after 3 weeks of rehearsal, director Mike Nichols fired him, saying he was too young for the part. Still, Gene refused to be discouraged. More roles followed, including Hawaii and Downhill Racer. He nearly became the TV dad of the Brady Bunch, but turned it down, a decision that could have changed his entire career. Rise of Gene. Hackman. By the early 1970s, he wasn't just another actor trying to get by, he was a force to be reckoned with. Hollywood had taken notice of his raw talent, and soon, the roles that would define his career began to roll in. His first major breakthrough came in The French Connection from 1971, where he played Jimmy Popeye Doyle, a rough, relentless New York detective willing to do whatever it took to catch criminals. The role won him the Academy Award for Best Actor and solidified his place in Hollywood. Watching Gene in that film, you can see why he became such a respected actor. He didn't just play a character, he became the character. You could feel his intensity, his frustration, his determination. He made it all feel real, but Gene wasn't interested in being just another action star. He had a rare ability to adapt to different genres, effortlessly moving from intense dramas to thrillers, comedies, and even westerns. Over the next few years, he worked at an astonishing pace, starring in movies that would go on to become classics. One of his personal favorites was Scarecrow in 1973, where he played alongside a young Al Pacino. The film didn't become a massive box office hit, but critics loved it, and it won the prestigious Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It was a quieter, more introspective role for Gene, proving he wasn't just about action and hard-hitting performances. He could also bring depth and vulnerability to a character. Then came The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Here, Gene played Harry Call, a surveillance expert who becomes trapped in a web of paranoia and secrecy. The film was subtle, but powerful, showing a different side of Gene, quiet, reserved, yet deeply tormented. Watching him in that role, you can't help but feel his unease, his loneliness. It was another masterclass in acting, earning the film an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. And just when it seemed like Gene had done it all, he surprised everyone by stepping into the world of comedy. In 1978, he took on the role of Lex Luthor, the charming but ruthless villain in Superman, the movie. It was a complete departure from his usual roles, but he nailed it. His portrayal of Luthor was both menacing and hilarious, a perfect balance of intelligence, arrogance, and dark humor. He would go on to play the role in 2 more Superman sequels, making his version of Luthor one of the most iconic villains in film history. By the 1980s and 1990s, Gene had nothing left to prove, yet he continued to take on challenging and diverse roles. He played a basketball coach in Hoosiers, a film that has since been ranked as one of the greatest sports movies of all time. He delivered a powerful performance in Mississippi Burning, where he portrayed an FBI agent investigating the murder of civil rights activists in the Deep South, a role that earned him another Oscar nomination. And then, in 1992, he gave one of his most unforgettable performances in Unforgiven. Directed by Clint Eastwood, this was no ordinary Western. It was dark, gritty, and brutally realistic. Gene played Little Bill Daggett, a sadistic sheriff who believed he was bringing justice, but in reality was just another kind of monster. It was a chilling performance, one that won him his 2nd Academy Award, this time for Best Supporting Actor. Even in his later years, Gene continued to surprise audiences. By the early 2000s, after nearly 50 years in Hollywood, Gene decided it was time to step away from acting. His final film was Welcome to Mooseport in 2004, a lighthearted comedy that, while not a major hit, served as a fitting farewell to a legendary career. The Woman Who Stood by Gene Hackman. Of course, although less known than her legendary husband, Betsy Arakawa was an important part of Gene Hackman's life. Born in December 1959 in Hawaii, Betsy Arakawa was a talented musician from an early age. She grew up in Honolulu, where she began studying piano as a child. By the time she was just 11, she was already performing in youth concerts in front of thousands at the Honolulu International Center Concert Hall. Imagine that, an elementary school student standing on a grand stage, playing for an audience that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was clear she had a rare gift, one that would stay with her throughout her life. After high school, Betsy pursued further education at the University of Southern California from 1981 to 1983, but her interests weren't limited to classical music. She had a lively, adventurous spirit and took on various experiences that might surprise those who only knew her later as the wife of a Hollywood icon. She was a cheerleader for the Aztecs, a professional soccer team, and even worked as a production assistant on the television game show Card Sharks. Betsy met Gene Hackman in the mid-1980s while working part-time at a gym in California. At that time, Gene was already a household name. He had won his first Oscar, played the legendary Lex Luthor, and was one of the most sought-after actors in the industry. But despite all his success, there was something about Betsy that captivated him. Maybe it was her calmness, her ability to balance his often intense and demanding world. Whatever it was, the two quickly became inseparable. They moved in together, and by the end of the decade, decided to leave the chaos of Los Angeles behind, settling in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Santa Fe became their sanctuary, a place where they could enjoy the simple things, art, music, and the breathtaking landscapes of the Southwest. Their home, featured in Architectural Digest in 1990, was a masterpiece in itself, blending Southwestern styles and perched on a 12-acre hilltop with a stunning 360-degree view of the surrounding mountains. While Hackman continued acting in major films throughout the 90s and early 2000s, Betsy carved out her own space. She became the vice president of Pandora's, a well-known home decor and furnishing store in Santa Fe. She had a keen eye for design and beauty, and this work allowed her to express that creativity in a new way. It was clear that they were true partners in life. They attended Santa Fe's cultural events together, supported each other's passions, and enjoyed the kind of quiet, private existence that many in Hollywood could only dream of. For more than 30 years, Gene and Betsy were inseparable. While Hackman stepped away from acting in 2004, the two continued their life in Santa Fe, embracing a peaceful retirement filled with art, music, and close friendships. And in the end, they even left this world together. The silent clues left behind a while ago. We said that the first thing the police did was to test for carbon monoxide, and that the results were negative. However, still, they couldn't rule it out completely. Investigators knew that carbon monoxide poisoning can be tricky. It doesn't always show up in tests the way you'd expect. Could it be that the initial results were misleading? Could a silent, invisible killer have crept through Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's home without leaving any obvious trace? Carbon monoxide poisoning is one of the first things authorities check for in cases like this. It's odorless, colorless, and can easily go undetected. It seeps into the air, replacing oxygen in the bloodstream and slowly suffocating its victims. But Dr. Philip Keene, a retired chief medical examiner, pointed out something crucial. If the first tests came back negative, it would be highly unlikely for carbon monoxide poisoning to be the cause of death. And yet, the police weren't ready to dismiss it completely. Because toxicology tests take time and false negatives do happen, if there had been only a small leak in the house, the levels of carbon monoxide in the bodies might not have been high enough to be detected immediately. As investigators continued their search, they found something else that raised more questions. Medication, lots of it. There were pills for high blood pressure, chest pain, and thyroid issues. There were also Tylenol and medical testing records. But who did these medications belong to? Authorities wouldn't say. What they did know was that none of the pill bottles were spilled or out of place except for the ones found near Jean's body in the bathroom. Had she collapsed suddenly while reaching for her medicine? Or had something else happened? The detectives weren't taking any chances. They retrieved the bottles and sent them for further analysis. Toxicology tests would take weeks to complete, but the results could reveal whether any of these drugs, or a dangerous mix of them, played a role in their deaths. Then came another unsettling detail: the state of their bodies. Both Hackman and Arakawa had been dead long enough for their bodies to begin mummifying. Her hands and feet had already started the process, a sign that the dry, high-altitude climate of Santa Fe had accelerated decomposition. But without surveillance cameras or clear records of when they were last seen alive, investigators had no way of knowing exactly when they had died. That's when they turned to one final piece of technology: Gene's pacemaker. Gene had been fitted with a pacemaker, a device designed to regulate his heartbeat. Actor Gene Hackman's pacemaker shows he was likely dead for 9 days before the bodies of he and his wife. And as detectives soon realized, pacemakers don't just keep a person alive, they also store data. Every time the pacemaker activates, it leaves a digital record, like a heartbeat timeline that doctors can check. The police hoped that by analyzing Gene's pacemaker, they could pinpoint the exact moment he died. If they could do that, they'd have a much clearer picture of the timeline leading up to their deaths. What they found was surprising. The last recorded activity on Hackman's pacemaker was on February 17th, 9 days before their bodies were discovered. That meant he had been dead for over a week before anyone realized something was wrong. But if he had died first, what about Arakawa? Had she passed away at the same time? Or had she been alive for days after he was gone? The timeline was more confusing than ever. Nothing made sense yet, and with every new detail that surfaced, it became clear that this was not a simple case of natural causes. The 6 clues that could unlock the mystery. So what exactly did investigators find inside Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's home? And more importantly, what do these items tell us about their final days? When authorities entered the Santa Fe estate, they were expecting to find answers. Instead, they found more questions. Detectives quickly identified 6 key items that could hold the answers: 2 cell phones, medical records, a 2025 calendar planner, and 3 different medications. There were 2 green and colored cell phones, 2 bottles of medication, 1 bottle of over-the-counter Tylenol, my request medical records, and a 2025 monthly planner calendar. Each of these objects had the potential to reveal crucial details about what happened inside that house before the world realized something was wrong. The first major clues: 2 green-colored cell phones. Phones can hold a digital footprint of someone's last moments, texts, calls, voicemails, search history, GPS locations. Investigators seized them with the hope of piecing together the couple's final days. Who had they spoken to last? Had they reached out for help? Had Betsy been calling someone while Gene was already gone? And then, there was the biggest question. Was there anything on those phones that someone didn't want to be found? Then came the 2025 monthly planner. It might seem like just another household item, but in cases like these, a calendar can be incredibly revealing. People use them to jot down appointments, meetings, plans, even reminders about medications. Did Betsy or Jean have a doctor's visit scheduled? Were there notes about their health? Did they write anything that hinted at trouble? If they had been struggling, either with health or something else, would their planner show it? 3 different types of medication were taken from the house. Thyroid medication, a common prescription, but could it indicate underlying health issues? Diltiazem, used to treat high blood pressure and chest pain. Tylenol, a simple over-the-counter pain reliever, but when found near a deceased person, it takes on a different significance. The most concerning discovery was a bottle of pills scattered on the bathroom counter near Betsy's body. Had she collapsed while taking them? Had she taken too many? Or had someone else left them there? When Sheriff Mendoza was asked if the pills could be connected to their deaths, he didn't rule anything out. It was clear that toxicology tests would play a critical role in understanding what had happened, but the results would take weeks. Until then, all anyone had were theories, new evidence. Beyond these 6 items, there were even more details that didn't sit right with investigators. Detectives were struggling to piece together a timeline. The couple was known to be private, making it difficult to determine the last time anyone had seen or spoken to them. But one thing was becoming more certain. Their deaths weren't as simple as they first seemed. But just when they thought they had gathered all the evidence and that the whole case couldn't get any more complicated, new evidence was found in Gene Hackman's estate that will leave you speechless, just as it had left the police officers stunned. The news even reached Tucker Carlson, who shared it with his colleagues before recording his show. According to sources, Tucker said, "This is shocking. I can't believe no one checked on them earlier, especially considering what the police found." And when he said that, he was referring to the fact that the police had discovered the front door unlocked while the back door was found ajar. With this new evidence, the police began to move away from the idea that their deaths were purely accidental or natural. Instead, they started to consider the possibility that a third party had been involved. The mystery deepened, the answers were coming, and soon they would change everything. What do you think about the fact that the front door was unlocked while the back door was left ajar? Could this suggest something more than just a tragic accident? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more.